Let's get started. So for this presentation, the topic is blockchain carbon trading. And so for this presentation, there are 5 main areas that I want to focus on. First of all, who we are at Qianyuhui Investment. Second of all, the state of the voluntary carbon market, which is a bit different from the compliance market, which some of you might be familiar with. I know Ben did an event last month about the compliance market in China. So this is different, right? This is the voluntary market. It's separate from the compliance market. Point number 3, blockchain and carbon markets, or more broadly, where carbon markets are heading in the future, climate markets, right? So point number 4, our blockchain pilot projects, what we're working on here at Qianyuhui and Synergy blockchain for the development of the blockchain aspect of carbon trading. And finally, point number 5, I would have to mention collaboration in this space. I guess I could call it the crypto climate space, since there's not a better word to describe it, because we're not the only ones doing this, right? There's lots of people around the world that are engaging in this kind of innovation. So starting with who we are, right? We are Qianyuhui Investment. The company was founded in 2014. In 2016, we started co-developing projects with other companies based in Beijing. As you probably know, Beijing is the capital of carbon in China. A lot of companies are based here. In 2017, 2019, I joined the company around this time. We really started expanding our sales network at this time. And now we're dealing with mostly clients in Europe, but we have some in North America and East Asia as well. In Singapore, for example, and some now in Beijing. We have some upcoming clients that are based in Beijing that we probably won't mention during this call, but we'll have announcements coming out later this month about that. So we're very excited about that.
Right.
And I guess some other updates more recently. We independently developed our first project that's in Henan. That's an afforestation project. It's quite big. And we also became members of IETA, that's the International Emissions Trading Association, last year. And this year, in terms of other milestones, we actually surpassed 1 million tons of carbon credits sold on the voluntary market, which for us is a big milestone personally, since our company is small. We really only have 3 people in our office working on this, but we have other partners in the voluntary market that help us out here and there. So that's basically who we are. I kind of said this stuff already, but these are our core services, right? Carbon credit development. All of our carbon credits are under the VCS standard. Some of our credits also have a certified CCB, climate and biodiversity, climate, community, and biodiversity. So other co-benefits are beyond just offsetting CO2. What other benefits are there for local rural people? In terms of, we do other events as well. NEO is often going to events for innovation or for carbon trading. Sometimes doing talks at universities. I think he did one last weekend also. So this is basically what we do here. Our member organizations were, like I said, part of IETA. For the blockchain side, you'll notice the Climate Chain Coalition and INATBA, which is the International Association for Trusted Blockchain Applications. I'll talk a bit more about them later on. And partners and clients, we have, you might notice South Pole and EcoAct and Climate Care. They're pretty well known in the voluntary market world. We're also working with UNEP for a case study that should be coming out soon. It was delayed for a bit last year. We've also been partnering with other participants in the ESG sector, so like Allied Consulting, for example. This year we had a lot of people, and late last year, we had a lot of people come to us and ask us, how do we achieve carbon neutrality? What do we do? Can we buy carbon credits? And the first question we ask them is, what's your carbon footprint? And a lot of them don't know yet completely, or at least not enough to go through with a transaction for purchasing carbon credits, offsets to achieve carbon neutrality. So we found it beneficial to work with ESG reporting companies so they can help them calculate their carbon footprint, and then eventually offset and achieve carbon neutrality. So we're working with a lot of other organizations for other things. For example, also Zhejiang Donglingdashui, the Zhejiang Agriculture and Forestry University, they're very interested in what's called MRV, so monitoring, reporting, and verification in terms of carbon acid management and seeing how much carbon is in a forest, like a bamboo forest, for example, and trying to use emerging technology to improve that process, which I'll speak a bit more about later on in this presentation too. So that's who we work with. And so jumping right in to the voluntary market. Like I said before, the voluntary market is not part of a compliance market, right? This is not required by law. These are not national schemes for NDCs, right? So nationally determined contributions. This is extra. This is outside of that, if you will. It's usually private companies that want to achieve carbon neutrality, right? They want to advertise for CSR purposes, or maybe they have a climate action plan. Maybe they have certain targets that they've set for achieving net zero internally as a business, right? So they would purchase voluntary offsets, right, to achieve that. So looking at the market recently, this is probably the best data, most up-to-date data that's out there. And you can see a dramatic increase starting in 2018. And that's been consistent through this year. We were all very surprised during the pandemic, the early few months in the pandemic, that we weren't really sure what was going to happen in terms of demand for offsets, mainly due to airlines, because people weren't traveling as much, obviously. And so forecast on demand was kind of grim at first. But suddenly in the summertime, there was a huge amount of commitments that came out, pledges that came out from the private sector about achieving carbon neutrality. And that has continued. And all the research I've seen is forecasting that demand to continue probably until 2030. There might even be a supply shortage, which would be very, very unusual for this market, given historically that there was a demand oversupply of credits, right? So you can see that it has grown quite a bit since 2017, and it continues to do so with the amount of credits that are issued, right, created, and ready to transfer, and then the amount of credits that are offset, which is also called retirement, right? Retirement is when you claim that offset and you claim that carbon neutrality. So looking a bit more at the market and looking at the numbers, this is probably true for 2021 as well. As far as I know, these sources, these graphs are from Ecosystem Marketplace, which is really it's an invaluable resource for market data. And this is one of the problems I'll talk about later on, is that there's not great data on the voluntary market. All this information is self-reported through surveys. So we even though we're doing our best to get the best information we can about the market, there's just not great reporting on what's happening at the time. So these trends, I would say, are by and large still true in 2021. We see forestry and land use in table 1 on the left. You can see in terms of value, that's dominant in terms of value, but renewable energy in terms of volume is a bit higher. And if you look over at figure 6 on the right side, you'll see these are broken down by types, right? So voluntary credits can be classified in types, right? So renewable energy, including wind, solar, hydro, and then even the forestry sector, right? There's not just one forestry credit. There are credits there are projects that use a methodology for afforestation, right? If there was never a forest there before, right? That's afforestation. Reforestation, right? Replacing a forest that was once there. There's a number of methodologies that are used. So these are considered different types of credits. And as you can clearly see, the prices are kind of all over the place. Renewables can be very cheap at 75 cents per ton. Afforestation can go up to almost $8 per ton, and these are average prices. In general, the average price is around 3. I think it's going up to 4 this year for an average global price for a voluntary credit. And a voluntary credit is 1 ton of CO2, right? So if we look a bit more at the data, it's pretty interesting where these credits are coming from. Most of them are from India, by and large, but there's still a good amount from the United States. China ranks third in terms of the volume, right? How many credits and where they're being issued, right? Where are the projects located? That's in figure 7 on the left. Figure 8 on the right is really fascinating to me because the United States, the buyers in the United States, they prefer credits that come from projects in the United States. This is very different from demand in other countries like France, UK, Germany, mostly Europe, right? Buyers in Europe don't have a preference in terms of local carbon credits. That's mostly a US phenomenon. European buyers are interested in credits from anywhere, really. So that's where the credits are coming from, and that's where we see most of the buyers for this voluntary market. In terms of our company and the credits that we offer, this is our current portfolio of the projects that we have developed or co-developed with other companies that are based in Beijing. On the left, you can see the ID numbers, right? This is these are VCS ID numbers in the Vera registry for credits where you can find the information on the project. They're all in China. The project types, we have afforestation credits and we have IFM credits, right? So IFM is improved forest management, and this means that there was once a timber industry in this area, and the timber industry was stopped, and a carbon offset project was created to help finance, to replace the income that came from timber harvesting. And there's lots of retraining that goes on in terms of, pest control, fire control, disease control, forestry management. So jobs are created for forestry management as a result of these IFM projects, and for the afforestation too. But for afforestation, you have much more tree planting since it's an afforestation project. You'll see they're located in Henan. We have 2 in Henan. We have 2 in Inner Mongolia. We have 1 in Hubei province, 1 in Jiangxi, and we're still looking for that investor for the Anhui solar project. We've been focusing more on the forestry sector, but we're not opposed to expanding into other project types, right? For the total VCUs, they can range from small to very large. The afforestation projects are really big. Those are about 30,000 tons of CO2 over the lifetime of the project, right? So over about 60 years. Some of the other IFM projects, they can be smaller in scale. So we're talking like 8,000, maybe even a small, you can see like 2.6 million, 2.6 million tons of CO2. Some things like the solar projects can be very small. It's much smaller scale. So that's our portfolio. And these are the projects that we deal with. This is an example of an afforestation project that we offer. This one is in Nanzhao, which is in southwest Henan, in the city of Nanyang, up near the mountains down there. These are photos that we took. I think we went 2 weeks ago,
yeah.
3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago.
Yeah. We went and visited. We do site visits periodically. We consult with local people that live in the counties where the project is at, with the Forestry Bureau, as they oversee all of the tree planting that goes on down there. And for this project, you can see the ID, the standard. For the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, we match these with information in the reports that describe these projects, right? Third parties create reports that verify that this project is done according to the standards and is necessary for emissions reductions to occur. You'll see issued volumes and vintages, and these are just the credits that come out every year, right? Yeah. And buyers, when they want to buy, they might have a vintage in particular they want, a year in particular that they want. They might want a newer vintage, for example, or they may not care so much, and they may don't mind if they have older vintages too. So they're classified by vintage, and then the volume is in tons of CO2 for that year. And those are issued every 3 years, 4 years. It depends on the project, but they're verified by a third party before they're issued. So that's basically how, what a project looks like and how it's structured in terms of the amount of CO2 and how that comes out into the market. So that's more or less what we do at Qianyuhui for the voluntary market, and that's the current state of the market. And you might be wondering, what about the blockchain part? So let's get into that.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And I think it'd be fun to start with maybe a popular example. And since it's the Beijing Energy Network, I'm assuming there's some sci-fi fans in the audience. I don't know if you've read this book or not. The author certainly is well known, Kim Stanley Robinson. In The Ministry of the Future, which was his most recent novel that came out last year, there's a surprising amount of blockchain in this novel, and also carbon trading. And this is, you'll see the middle picture there. That's from chapter 43, and it's a short vignette, almost like a poem about a blockchain, right? What is a blockchain? What is encryption, right? And it's really interesting to me because this example comes from real life, right? You might have seen in the news recently, this was circulating a lot a month ago, that Kim Stanley Robinson based the fictional blockchain carbon trading in his novel from a real life project called Global 4C. And if you go look on Global 4C's website, you'll see their response to his novel. I think they were happy for the publicity, but they wanted to clarify, what is their design for the project and what are their goals with the project. So they clarified that on their website. And in the novel, basically, there's a main character who is tasked with coming up with solutions for mitigating climate change. And one of the solutions is I guess a global currency that's based on emissions reductions, right? So carbon quantitative easing, right? And that's not what we're doing here, although that is one idea, right? And I guess my point is there's not one way to apply this technology. There's many ways to apply this technology. And there's not a real consensus yet as to how this can be used or what's the best way to go about it, right? So much like in the novel, one approach would be to have a global currency based on carbon. And if we look at the academic literature, this is just a table from a paper that's looking at different types of blockchains, right? Theoretical approaches for using a blockchain for carbon trading. It's pretty interesting because the author is specifically looking at Australia's carbon market and how blockchain technology could be used to improve that national market in Australia, right? And the author goes through and he basically classifies the existing literature on blockchain for carbon trading into 4 clusters, right? You'll see them in red circled up there. There's the networked carbon model, the industry 4.0 model, the techno-libertarian model, and the voluntary offset model, right? And we're not going to get into what this all is and how they're different because that would take another hour, I think. But I just want to show that there are different opinions and approaches on the way to use this technology. And for this presentation, we're just going to keep it simple and we'll go with something like the networked carbon model. The idea of networking carbon markets is not a new idea. This is an idea that predates the idea of using blockchain. And it's basically just making linkages, right? So for example, right now, in the compliance market, we have the Switzerland ETS linked with the EU ETS, for example. And they're going to link, they have plans to link with Peru and with Ghana. So forming a market linkage, right? That's the networking of markets. Same thing is true for Quebec's national market. They have linked with California's market. So the idea of linking markets, we see this in the compliance world, but we can also do this in the voluntary market, right? We can create networks of markets. And that's the whole idea with blockchain, right? Creating a network where markets, participants in a market are free to come and free to go, free to form their own links with other participants in the market, right? That's basically what blockchain is doing, right? So this is the resource that I shared for the WeChat post for this event tonight. And this is an overview of post-2020 climate markets, right? So a climate market, including carbon, right? Other assets in addition to carbon that exist in a market environment with a new kind of architecture. And why do we want a new kind of architecture? Well, as I said in the post for the event, and I took that, I paraphrased a quote from this paper, which is really great. I really recommend it. Basically, in carbon markets, we have different units, we have different assets, we have different rules of governance in different countries. We have different centralized registries that don't always use the same kind of structure. We have a MRV process that maybe is not compatible all the way with a registry. So basically we have all different types of data, and it really slows down the process of setting up a project, monitoring and reporting and verifying that project, getting that data to the market, and then finally, an end user for a purchase. So this environment is very slow, really slows it down. Is there anything that you want to add about this market structure currently and using blockchain to improve it? Is there anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think the most important use of this technology is it's all about cross-border trading and cross-country trading.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is a decentralized system, might be easier to any country, any region to the whole market. Mm-hmm. Unless right now, if any country they want to link their carbon market to another country, it will take a very long time to have a bilateral agreement. Mm-hmm. So a decentralized carbon market for the Earth mm-hmm. might be the trend in the future, mm-hmm. especially after the Paris Agreement came into enforced. Mm-hmm. So we hope there is this kind of market in future for solve our climate problem. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then also, I mean, that's a good point with compliance markets, because sometimes voluntary credits are also allowed in compliance systems. Like in California, for example, yeah. You can have about 10% of the credits coming from the voluntary market into a compliance market. So that's also very complicated because the way they operate is not the same. That data is not the same. So by having a blockchain, by having this transaction record that everyone shares, yes. That uses the same kind of infrastructure, digital infrastructure, it'd be theoretically easier for this data to flow. And that's what we want to do, right? And in a more transparent and in a more secure way. So that's the big idea. And this, I mean, this is a complicated diagram. But I guess what I wanted to show is that this purple part, this purple section, right, the network climate markets, this is the same as the diagram you just saw, right? It's just in a broader context, right? That's including climate finance, and then that's including the climate action and MRV that comes before, right? So we're trying to view the other sections of this big picture, right? And we want data to flow from the red part to the purple part, right? The monitoring, recording, verification information is easily accessible by the market participants, because right now we're mostly dealing with spreadsheets and PDF files, yeah. And that's not the best way to do it, in my opinion. We need a new kind of digital infrastructure so this information can flow better in a more secure way, and blockchain can do that. And so if we zoom out even more, that brown section, you probably can't read it, but the brown section is registry systems, mm-hmm. right? So registry systems linked to MRV systems, which in the red, which are then linked to the markets in the purple, which are then linked to climate finance at the end, or the beginning, if you think about it, with the flow of money going back to registries and going back to the MRV in the red, right? And this even includes climate data in the green part, yeah. Just information about forests or the atmosphere, having all this climate data that also feeds into it. So trying to build a system that accounts like not just one platform, but multiple platforms or multiple protocols that can communicate with each other in a more secure digital way. So I have the link here too, if you want to check that out. Open Climate is the project that's doing this. They're based in Yale, and very interesting stuff that they're doing. So I would recommend that too. So what are we doing with blockchain? Right now we have 2 pilot projects that we're working on. On the left, you'll see a screenshot of ECO2 Ledger, and this is it's in the testnet phase. It's a public blockchain. It's basically trying to fit into that market layer, right? Making the transaction process more transparent when it comes to buying and selling a credit and then offsetting. So making that carbon offset information publicly accessible and incentivizing people to participate in this network, right? And you can access that at testnet.eco2dap.com. Mm-hmm. We'll hopefully have a mainnet later this year. Yeah. But it's in development since 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Started. So it's moving along pretty nicely. You can see it's in Chinese right now. We should have English in the next month or so. And you can see some details on the right. On the left side, that's a block explorer. So, that's block history. So looking at, you can actually go and look up those hashes, those random numbers, and you can see the transactions that occurred during that time, right? So it's a history of transactions, right? It's a secure shared history of transactions. On the right side, you can see the actions that occurred, right? New events. So a new deal is created. This is all test stuff. This is not really happening with real market participants. This is just us testing it internally. So new deals were created, orders were finished, a transfer occurred, another new deal, transfer, new assets neutralized, right? One of us in testing it neutralized a carbon asset, right? So being able to provide this information to anyone that wants to see it, right? To have a better view of the market, right? So that's what we're doing with EC2 Ledger, and it's built on Parity's substrate. So it's a kind of it's similar. It's what Polkadot is built on. If you're familiar with the blockchain ecosystem right now, Polkadot is very similar to Ethereum. So it's that base layer that Polkadot is built on. It's a similar type of architecture that the blockchain is coded in, right? And then on the right, that's an app that we're testing called My Carbon. And with My Carbon, users can claim rewards in the app. The rewards are a Ethereum token. And by showing their climate knowledge, the users can just earn a free token. And then if they want to offset their carbon footprint, they can burn the token, right? So burning the token eliminates it. It's destroyed forever. And we receive a notification of the burning of the token. And then we will honor their carbon neutrality, and we will offset a carbon credit in real life, right? And you can see that here. Whenever we do an offset, we have batches of them, and we keep records of them, and then we publish that on Ethereum. So this is actually a contract in Ethereum that we wrote. You can view it at the address below, etherscan.io. That's the address for this contract. And in this contract, we included the date, the amounts of VCUs. VCUs are the carbon credits, are the offsets that were offset, which project it came from, the purpose of it, why do we do it, who do we do it for, and a little note, just comments about how many people we did this for. So we publish that on Ethereum periodically. Ideally, we want to do this on our own system. We're using Ethereum now because it's convenient to use. It's very popular to use, but we're not beholden to using Ethereum or Polkadot. We are pretty open in terms of what type of blockchain we use, whatever is best for us. But this is what we're doing now. And then in addition to this, right, when we actually look at a registry, at a voluntary carbon market registry, you can see that we offset in the registry itself, right? So this is a centralized registry that we do offsets in, right? And you can see I highlighted in red, right? The reason we did this, right? The people we did it for. We do this every few months when we have offsets for individuals. We will retire for them because individuals cannot do this in the registry. And we want to make it more transparent for them so they can see that, okay, we have offset for you for this much at this time from this project, right? So this is how it's done currently with offsetting. Not every user has a demand to see this, but we're anticipating that given the growth of the voluntary market and the interest in carbon neutrality, we think this will be more of a interest by users who demand carbon neutrality in the future. So we want to make that more transparent for them.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, running. Just to wrap up a bit, like I mentioned before, we're not the only ones doing this. We're not the only ones that are trying to innovate in the climate space using blockchain. We're a member of the Climate Chain Coalition. There are over 200 members now. This is just the top of the list. There were a lot of members that joined last year, but they're all doing different things. And for example, one of the members, EverCity, they're based in Russia. They're focused on SDG finance, and they have a bulletin that they started doing. The first issue came out in April, and they're doing another issue now.
Yeah.
And you can see EC2 Ledger. We gave them a few updates on what we're doing at EC2 Ledger with the ECO2 Ledger. But there are other projects. Blockchain for Climate is in there. Who else is in there? Well, INAPA also.
Yeah,
INAPA does a lot of work. There's a lot of crossover with projects that are working with INAPA.
We joined the climate action working group.
Mm-hmm. So there are others. There are many others in the space that are trying to innovate for climate. So I'm at about half an hour now, so I'm going to wrap up real quick. But thank you all for coming tonight and for listening, and we appreciate your time, and we look forward to answering your questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. From CSR, their shareholders or the customers value carbon neutrality,
yes.
And they want to see a carbon neutral product or a carbon neutral service.
Yeah.
So I would say that is probably the biggest motivation right now.
And some international brand like the top 500 company in the world, and they care about their brand value. So they think if they shape their brand carefully and then show how eco action they can do in the public and on the international base, then they think their share price will go higher. So that's why you can see a lot of big brands like Apple, Google, Amazon, they care about ESG, and they care about how to reduce their CO2 emission. And almost all the big four oil companies in the world, they have a carbon neutral pledge. So those companies, they're doing this for their brand value and also for sustainable development.
Some companies are anticipating that they will, in the near future, be part of a compliance market, and they think it's worth their time to get involved in the voluntary market because they want to have experience with carbon assets. So not most companies, but some companies do get involved in voluntary carbon trading because they want to learn about how this works and they want to be ready for a compliance scheme that requires them to be in the compliance market. So that is also motivation.
Yeah, and regarding the individual, under current system, the individual cannot have their own carbon account. So the company can offset their CO2 emission for those individuals, that's true, but they cannot offset by their own, for example, use their cell phone or use their laptop to operate their account. No, they don't have a chance. So that's why we also think that blockchain might be the good trade for the future personal climate action. Everyone should have their own carbon account to offset their CO2 emission. That's why we want to do this.
I mean, also from another point of view, like you could buy an offset. You could go to a platform, a vendor that sells carbon credits, and like make your wedding carbon neutral or like make your flights carbon neutral. You know, that's all out there. But we are thinking that because there's more interest in carbon neutrality, there's more interest in offsetting. I think people want to have more of something tangible in terms of I don't know, being able to see like where it happens or how it happens, because I could go somewhere and buy an offset and offset something that I do, but I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect between like what did I really buy? Like when I offset my wedding, like what do I have?
Yeah.
Like I think people want to like I don't know, somehow experience it more, if that makes sense. And I think by making it more of a transparent process where they can be more involved and see more of it happening, I think that's more of a demand, or that will be a future demand.
Yeah.
So right now the EC2 ledger is structured using, it's called, so POW is proof of work, yeah. Right? So which is what Bitcoin uses, which is very energy intensive. And what we, nominated. So what we designed with EC2 ledger is to use a proof of stake. There's different types of proof of stake consensus mechanisms,
Yeah.
which involves a user risking, a certain amount of tokens. So it's not as energy intensive as a proof of work consensus mechanism. And I think what's interesting about EC2 Ledger, the way we designed it, is that the transactions that occur on the network, the fees for those transactions will get pooled into an address, like a carbon neutral address. And then periodically we will use those fees from the transactions to offset the emissions of the network.
Yes.
So we're trying to design EC2 Ledger to be a carbon neutral network.
Yeah.
And then with regard to Ethereum, I know now that the energy use is also rather high, not quite as high as Bitcoin. But when Ethereum plans to transition to Ethereum 2.0, which will be a staking form of consensus, so it will no longer use proof of work. So in the meantime, I think Ethereum is working for us. We'd rather have our own system, or I mean, if something else comes up that we like, that we think is good and valuable, and has a low carbon footprint,
yeah.
I think we would consider it. But yeah, that's kind of what's happening with Ethereum. Yeah.
VCS6 standard, you need to at least provide a 20 years contract, and maximum it could reach 60 years. And one more thing, under the current carbon standard system, you cannot sell the future carbon credit. All you can sell is already happened carbon credit. That means right now is 2021, and then you only can sell previous carbon credit. You cannot sell the future. So every 3 to 5 years, you need to, as the third party, to verify your project. Are they still good? Are they still in the good shape? And keep those three in the same to your report. Then they will give you a validation report. Then in live report, and they will correct the real CO2 reduction of your project. Then they will adjust the correct number of this project in your account system. Then the standard will add those numbers into your account. So minimum will be the 20 years. Yeah. We operate by a centralized system. For example, like a VCS standard, they provide a centralized registry system called Vera registry. Then when we sell our credit to our customer, we just go into our account, operate it, and which kind of customer we want to deal with. Then we use our account, send our credit to their account. But this centralized operation is not easy to expand this business. For example, for Chinese company, hardly any company can acquire their carbon account under the Vera standard because they don't have English ability. And it will be complicated if they want to provide the company's related document in English too. So it's not easy to expand this system into many different places. We are thinking about if there is the system that can decentralize the database into different countries, then probably they can have a server in China. Then we are easier to convince government like to recognize this standard as a kind of industrial criterion, and also easier to promote this standard into other countries. And on the other hand, the current carbon neutrality are in this system, they will provide you a certificate. But we are thinking about how about record all the carbon neutrality in the blockchain. Then it can easily to spread anywhere in the world. And for example, if you know Microsoft offset their CO2 emission how many tons a year, and be recorded on the blockchain, then users can easily to double check those information. But under the current standard, under the current system, the individual user hardly to make double check it's too professional, too complicated for the ordinary user, no matter from the small and medium enterprise or individual. And blockchain provide a basic database layer, like can increase the application from many other companies. For example, if we use the blockchain network, then anyone can make an application according to those data. We can diversify those purpose of carbon credit, not just buy and sell and neutralize. We can diversify its application. For example, you open a coffee shop, you can ask your customer pay the coffee by the carbon credit. That can increase lots of innovation. Yeah.
Just to add to that, and to clarify a bit, the way the centralized registries are set up, that's just the best way to do it at that time.
Yeah.
And like I have enjoyed working with Vera when it comes to issuing credits for projects. They're good to work with.
Yeah.
I think though that, I mean, they also are thinking about where is the internet going? Everyone else in this market is asking the same question. If you look at look up Gold Standard, they are looking at blockchain innovation too.
Yes.
IHS Markit, we just spoke with IHS Markit 2 days ago.
Yes.
They're looking at making a meta registry. World Bank is looking at that too. If you're in this market, you're looking at what's the next emerging trend for the internet itself. And I think if you go back and, so a winding answer to this question, if you go back and look at the origin of the internet and how the internet was developed, it wasn't really developed with bad actors in mind. The internet was developed by, I think, good-natured academics that wanted to share information. And encryption was not, it was attempted to a degree, especially with things like a native currency for the internet. If you look, I think it's error message 402. If you look at, like the error messages you get when a page doesn't load, there's an error message for, native currency not found. And that was an idea that was conceived in the early days of the internet of having a native digital currency using encryption that was native to the internet. And I think now we're finally able to do that by using a blockchain. And I think blockchain will just become internet infrastructure. I don't think we'll really be using the word blockchain very much in a decade from now. I think it'll just become part of the internet itself as infrastructure with a native digital currency or multiple forms of digital currency that are part of the internet itself. And I think we are assuming that that is going to happen. And I think that is guiding us as well as we think about the networking of carbon markets, which is just networking. It's just using a new internet tool to network them together.
The current goal, a major goal of the Chinese carbon market is for reduce their energy consumption and increase their energy efficiency. So the national ETS, which launched on the February 1st, are focused on the electricity market. And their voluntary carbon standard are still under the suspension phase. And I would say the Chinese carbon market is still developing under the early phase compared to the EU ETS. So they don't want to give the economic big impact in the beginning phase. They are careful about not give the true manipulation to the electricity field. So probably in the first or second years, you won't see the big emission reduction, but maybe after the 2030s, when the peak of CO2 emission is reached, then it will give the bigger pressure to the A field of industrial, and then at that time, probably more and more companies, especially SOE, will use the credit to offset their CO2 emission. And I feel they have a really confidence for their pledge. So I believe they can reach their goal, 2060 carbon neutrality on time. So we're still under the beginning phase, I believe, and the regulation will become harder and harder. I think probably after 2 or 3 years later. Yeah. No, yeah, not right now. Only the small wind power,
Small scale.
small scale, and the small scale
Small scale hydro.
Yeah, can apply the carbon credit. So right now, those larger investment in the electricity infrastructure, you'll be seeing as kind of emission reduction in the comparison market, not the voluntary market. So you can use you can use a carbon standard to verify those projects. And how will process control this blockchain? Okay, that will be difficult. I think so, and because it depends on what kind of market. In the comparison market, I don't think any government will give the control of their market to any decentralized system. But in voluntary carbon market, we are trying to make some innovation. Probably after the 2 to 3 years, and we can make a small scale or medium scale of blockchain carbon market on a global base. So we are trying to build out a new market based on blockchain technology. You will see what we develop in future.
In terms of Chinese policy, when it comes to blockchain for carbon trading, based on the conversations we've had, there's nothing concrete going on as far as I know. But there's interest, and there is blockchain was considered a key technology, like what, 2 years ago. So there is interest there. Nothing's materialized yet, so we'll have to see on that.
But probably those solution for blockchain technology might use a consortium blockchain solution. Permission blockchain. Yeah. So if in that case, I think government will choose it in their own system. But now it will not open all the information to the public, because to any country in the world, the energy consumption is kind of I think it's kind of confidential information to as a country.
Also, in terms of the blockchains that are, I don't know, I'm not sure how to phrase this. There's the blockchain service network, the BSN, that was created, and you can see which networks are under that BSN umbrella. Some of them include Ethereum's on there, Cosmos is on there, like blockchains that are the development on blockchain that occurs outside of China, as well as some that are developed inside of China. What that is being used for, I don't really know. I haven't really kept up on it. But in terms of policy, if you're interested in like the Chinese policies on blockchain, maybe look at the blockchain service network and see what's happening with that.
The first question, I think at least, in my opinion, is 2 years maybe. I think, and from the latest the regulation released from Centralized and
the Ministry of Ecology and Environment.
In the draft, we can see it mentioned about the CCER, but from the it was gone. So I think it might take anyway. CCER is part of the compliance market, so I won't treat it as a very important rule in the compliance market. But for the voluntary carbon market, yes, it's important. Before it reopen, we will still use the international standard, and we're looking for it reopen again. The transportation sector. In my opinion, I don't think Chinese ETS will put the transportation sector into its compliance market. Besides the aviation, if we put aviation as part of way of transportation, because I think Chinese government will use the electronic car to replace the gasoline car. So in that case, the emission of the electricity car could be moved into a electricity field, right? I think so. So far I didn't hear any opinion or information about where put transportation into the NTS. So far, at least right now, maybe within the 5 years, they won't put this into the national ETS. It's my opinion.
Yeah, and then the next question or opinion is that the previous TCER was an immature scheme, and the question.
NDCs contradict voluntary market offsets. So when will there be a more robust global scheme that uses a blockchain? Probably not before there is clarification on NDCs and whether or not voluntary offsets are part of that or external to that. There's a lot of other policies that need to be decided first that would come first. What do you think?
World Bank is making a global warehouse, global chemical warehouse based on the blockchain. And I think that might be a good scheme globally you mentioned about for the future development. And their network is under testing. And the main problem, I don't think it will be the technology. The main problem will be we are right now under the Paris Agreement era, but the current trading mechanism came from the Kyoto Protocol. And what's wrong with the Paris Agreement? Because Article 6 haven't make the detail of the ITMO, International Transaction Mitigation Outcome. So there's no update mechanism for global CO2 reduction exchange. We are waiting for the UN can make the progress in legislation for maybe this year or next year during the COP. So the problem will not technical part. The problem will be definitely legislation part, and we need to wait until the global society have the consensus about how to exchange the emission reduction. Besides, before that, the only thing we can use would be the VCS or the domestic standard CCER. And right now, CCER was suspended, so the only solution might be VCS. I can say yes, it's a little bit outdated. That's true, complicated, and the cost is high. The verification period is very long, around the 2 years. That's true, but we need to wait. Yeah, it's an international label that we cannot change it in very short time. Yeah, thank you.
I've not heard that mentioned. Have you?
No.
Okay. Well, thank you for the question. I want to look into that now.
Yeah, it sounds.
But you have to understand.
It may not be. It may not be in the voluntary market. It could be in the. Is it in the Beijing pilot market?
Yeah. It probably in the Beijing
Sorry,
pilot market.
am I allowed to?
Please go ahead.
Am I allowed to speak?
Yeah.
Sorry, because yeah, this is Sunny. Hi. Because I just opened my there is like PPT in front of me, and there is a news just showed that in Chinese maybe it's more easy to understand. It's called 长安链生态联盟. So it's just China Ecological Alliance in Beijing is just established in this January. So this is like an eco network of blockchain plus carbon trading system. So yeah, just for carbon trading parties, like the whole process data storage like the reliable sharing application of carbon trading from emission rights acquisition, like trading, circulation to transaction verification, and let's say statistics will be realized to promote the transparency, something like this, and the convenience of carbon trading market. And also from the second part is clean energy consumption, and it mentioned like to build a flexible energy trading mode and efficient resource allocation system and intelligent subsidy accounting mechanism to support the green energy development. So this is basically the two main like topics that these alliance focus on now. Maybe after this, I can share the link to the group, to the WeChat group later, and maybe you can, for your reference. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great, thank you. That is very appreciated.
Yeah, please share the link.
Sure.